Most people think their problem is discipline. It isn't. The real problem is this: your mind does not believe you. Every time you promise yourself something small and don't follow through, your identity weakens. And every time you win something small, something almost insignificant, your identity strengthens. This audiobook is about one truth most people never learn. Big victories are not created by big effort. They are created by small proof, repeated daily. If you stay with this, you won't feel motivated. You'll feel controlled, and control changes everything. Chapter 1: Stop chasing big wins. Big wins are addictive. They look good in your head. They sound impressive when you say them out loud. They make you feel ambitious without requiring you to change anything today, and that is exactly why they keep you stuck. Most people believe big goals are the solution. In reality, big goals are often the delay. They give the mind a hit of hope without demanding proof. They create emotional excitement without behavioral change. They let you feel like a different person without becoming one. And your brain knows the difference. Here is the truth most people never confront: your brain does not change from inspiration. It changes from evidence. Big wins promise future evidence. Small wins deliver present evidence. And the mind only updates itself in the present. Think about how identity actually forms. Not how people talk about it, how it really works. You don't believe you are strong because you want to be strong. You believe you are strong because you have lifted weight, carried pressure, endured discomfort, and survived it. You don't believe you are disciplined because you admire discipline. You believe you are disciplined because you have shown up repeatedly when it would have been easier not to. Identity is not declared. It is recorded. Every action you take is a vote. Every action you avoid is also a vote. And here is where big wins fail you. Big goals are too far away to register as evidence. They live in imagination, not in memory. They do not train the nervous system. They do not condition behavior. They make you hopeful. But hope does not build self-trust. Only completion does. This is why people who talk the biggest often change the least. Their mind is full of intention and empty of proof, and the brain keeps score. Every time you say, "I'm going to start," and don't, something subtle happens. Not dramatic, not emotional, but precise. Your brain updates its prediction model. It learns, this person does not follow through, not because you are lazy, not because you are broken, but because the evidence says so. And once the brain learns that pattern, it protects itself. It lowers expectation. It resists effort. It creates friction. That friction is what people call lack of motivation. But motivation was never the problem. The problem was credibility. Now here is the shift. Small wins restore credibility. They are not impressive. They are not exciting. They are not shareable. And that is exactly why they work. A small win is an action so manageable that failure becomes unlikely, completion becomes normal, and repetition becomes possible. When you complete something small, your brain does not debate it, it records it. When you repeat that completion, your brain begins to expect it. Expectation turns into identity. This is the hidden psychological process. Your brain believes what you repeatedly show it, not what you tell it, not what you plan, not what you promise, what you show it. And small wins are the fastest way to show proof. This is why chasing big wins backfires early. They raise the bar too high too soon. They require a version of you that does not exist yet. They create pressure without capacity. Pressure without capacity leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to self-distrust. Self-distrust kills momentum. Small wins do the opposite. They lower the entry cost. They remove negotiation. They eliminate drama. And because they are achievable, they get done. Done actions teach the brain something powerful. I am someone who finishes. That belief is not motivational. It is stabilizing. Once the mind believes completion is normal, behavior follows effortlessly. This is why people who master small wins appear disciplined. They are not forcing themselves. They are acting in alignment with expectation. Expectation is everything. Your brain wakes up every day predicting what kind of person you are. Those predictions shape energy, focus, and resistance. If the prediction is, this person quits, everything feels heavy. If the prediction is, this person finishes, action feels lighter. Small wins change the prediction. Let's get practical. A small win is not go to the gym for an hour. That's a big win disguised as discipline. A small win is put on gym shoes, or walk for 5 minutes, or stretch for 60 seconds. It must be small enough to feel almost too easy, not because you are weak, but because you are training a system. You are not training muscles yet. You are training identity, and identity training requires consistency, not intensity. Here is a rule to remember. If the task requires motivation, it is too big. Small wins should require decision, not motivation. You should be able to complete them on your worst day, your busiest day, your lowest energy day. That is the point, because every completed small win sends the same message. I do what I say I will do. Say that enough times through action, and the mind stops arguing. This is also why you must stop romanticizing struggle. Struggle feels meaningful, but struggle is not proof. Completion is, you do not get stronger by suffering randomly. You get stronger by winning consistently, and winning consistently starts small. This chapter is not telling you to abandon ambition. It is telling you to sequence it correctly. Big wins come later, after identity hardens, after self-trust stabilizes, after consistency becomes automatic. Until then, big goals are noise, small wins are signal, and the brain only responds to signal. So here is your instruction before moving forward. Stop chasing outcomes. Start collecting evidence. Pick one small action. Define it clearly. Make it repeatable. Make it unavoidable. Then do it every day. No expansion, no upgrades, no dramatic increases, just completion. Because the goal right now is not progress. The goal is belief. Your brain believes what you repeatedly show it. Show it something small. Show it something real. Show it something finished. You have now stopped chasing big wins, and that clears the ground for something far more important. Because once you stop chasing outcomes, you can start building identity. And identity is where real control begins. You've learned why big wins fail early. Now let's talk about what actually shapes who you think you are. Chapter 2, your identity is built on evidence, not desire. Wanting to change feels productive. It feels mature. It feels responsible. It feels like movement. But wanting by itself does nothing. Desire is not transformation. Desire is not discipline. Desire is not identity. Desire is just a feeling, and feelings do not rewrite who you believe you are. This is the hard truth most people avoid. Your self-image does not care what you want. It only responds to what you do. You can want confidence. You can want control. You can want a different life. But your identity will not update until it sees evidence. This is why people stay stuck for years while working on themselves. They are full of desire and empty of proof. The mind is not inspired by intention. It is convinced by behavior. Think about how you describe yourself right now, not out loud, internally. Those descriptions are not dreams. They are summaries. Your brain is summarizing patterns it has observed. Patterns of action, patterns of avoidance, patterns of follow-through or failure. You are not who you hope to be. You are who you have repeatedly shown yourself to be. That is not judgment. That is mechanics, and mechanics can be changed, but only one way, through evidence. Every completed action is a psychological vote, a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. And just like in real elections, one vote rarely decides the outcome, but repeated votes always do. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They cast too few votes, then they wait for identity to change. It never does, because identity follows action, never the other way around. Say it again, slowly. Identity follows action, never the other way around. You do not become disciplined and then act disciplined. You act disciplined enough times that discipline becomes your identity. You do not become confident and then speak confidently. You speak up enough times that confidence becomes normal. Action comes first, belief comes second. Always. The problem is that people want the belief first. They want to feel like a different person before acting like one, but the brain doesn't work that way. The brain updates beliefs the same way a court updates verdicts, through evidence. And evidence must be observable, repeatable, recorded. A thought is not evidence, a plan is not evidence, a promise is not evidence. Only action is. This is why small completed tasks are so powerful. They may feel insignificant, but psychologically they are decisive. When you complete something, anything, your brain logs it. It doesn't log the size of the task. It logs the pattern of completion. Completion teaches the mind a simple rule. This person finishes what they start. Once that rule begins to repeat, identity shifts, slowly, quietly, irreversibly. This is also why inconsistency damages self-image faster than failure. Failure with effort still produces evidence. Inconsistency produces confusion, and confusion erodes trust. If your actions are unpredictable, your brain cannot form a stable identity, so it defaults to caution, resistance, hesitation. That hesitation is what people mislabel as fear. It's not fear, it's uncertainty about who you are. Small wins remove that uncertainty. They are clear, they are simple, they are repeatable, and repetition is the language identity understands. Let's talk about desire for a moment. Desire feels intense, but intensity fades, and when desire fades, only systems remain. If your identity depends on desire, it will collapse when motivation drops. If your identity depends on evidence, it will hold under pressure. This is why wanting change is dangerous. It creates emotional satisfaction without behavioral cost. It allows you to feel aligned with a future version of yourself without doing the work of becoming them. Desire becomes a substitute for action. You think about change instead of executing it. You imagine progress instead of recording it, and your identity stays the same. Now here is the correction. Stop asking, who do I want to be? Start asking, what evidence am I collecting today? That question forces action, not grand action, not impressive action, but clear action. A small task, defined, completed, that is a vote. One vote does not transform identity, but daily votes do. This is why you must design actions that guarantee votes, not maybes, not hopes, guarantees. A task you can complete even when tired, even when busy, even when unmotivated, because identity is not built on your best days. It is built on your average ones. This is also why you must stop changing your plan every time you feel bored. Boredom is not a sign to quit. It is a sign the system is working. Once an action becomes boring, it means it is no longer threatening your identity. It has been integrated, and integration is the goal. When something is integrated, it no longer requires willpower. It feels normal. Normal behaviors shape identity faster than heroic ones. Here is a practical rule. If you want to become someone new, stop asking how to feel different. Start asking how to act differently, slightly, daily. Then repeat that action until it no longer feels like a decision. That is when identity updates. Remember this, your brain is not listening to your affirmations. It is watching your behavior. Every skipped action casts a vote against change. Every completed action casts a vote for it. And over time, the vote count becomes undeniable. Identity follows action, never the other way around. This chapter is not about pressure. It is about precision. You don't need more desire. You need more evidence. Evidence calms the mind. Evidence stabilizes confidence. Evidence removes internal debate. Once the debate ends, action becomes automatic. And when action becomes automatic, big victories stop feeling risky. They feel earned. You now understand how identity is actually built. Not through wanting, but through proof. And proof is created one small action at a time. You've learned why desire alone keeps you trapped. Now it's time to talk about the force that turns evidence into momentum. Because identity is built on action, but it is sustained by something deeper. Chapter 3: Why Self-Trust is More Powerful Than Motivation. Motivation is loud. It makes promises. It creates urgency. It convinces you that this time will be different, and then it disappears. That's not a flaw, that's its nature. Motivation is emotional energy, and emotional energy is unstable. It rises with excitement. It collapses under pressure. It fades with boredom. If your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be temporary. This is the mistake most people make. They try to fuel long-term change with short-term emotion, and when motivation drops, they blame themselves. They say they're lazy, undisciplined, broken. They're none of those things. They're just using the wrong engine. What actually drives lasting change is not motivation. It's self-trust. Self-trust is quiet. It doesn't hype you up. It doesn't make speeches. It simply says, I know what happens when I act. And that certainty changes everything. Here is the core difference. Motivation pushes you to start. Self-trust allows you to continue. Motivation gets you excited on day 1. Self-trust carries you through day 30. Motivation fluctuates. Self-trust compounds. And the compounding effect is what creates control. Self-trust is built one way. And only one way, through kept promises. Every promise you keep strengthens internal authority. Every promise you break weakens it, not dramatically, not emotionally, but structurally. Your brain is constantly asking one question: can I rely on this person? Every action answers that question. When you say you'll do something and follow through, your brain logs reliability. When you say you'll do something and don't, your brain logs inconsistency. Over time, those logs form a pattern, and that pattern becomes your self-image. This is why broken promises hurt more than missed goals. A missed goal can be reframed. A broken promise cannot. A broken promise is direct evidence against your credibility, and once credibility erodes, motivation stops showing up, not because you lack willpower, but because your mind no longer trusts your intentions. Why would it? If history shows that your promises rarely turn into action, your brain protects you by lowering expectation. Lower expectation feels like resistance, like hesitation, like procrastination, but it's not sabotage, it's risk management. Your brain is saying, don't invest energy here, it probably won't pay off. That is what low motivation really is. Low motivation is low trust. Now here's the shift. You do not rebuild self-trust by trying harder. You rebuild it by promising less and keeping more. Most people do the opposite. They get inspired. They overpromise. They overload themselves. Then they fail. And every failure confirms the same belief: I can't rely on myself. This cycle repeats until confidence collapses. The solution is not more hype. You don't need hype, you need proof. Proof comes from promises that are small enough to keep, not impressive promises, reliable ones. A promise you can keep on your worst day is a good promise. A promise you can only keep when motivated is a bad one, because motivation is not guaranteed, but your standards should be. Self-trust grows when your behavior becomes predictable to yourself. When you say, I'll do this, and it happens, again and again and again, at first the effect is subtle. You don't feel inspired. You don't feel powerful. You feel calm. That calm is trust forming. With trust comes a new internal tone, less arguing, less negotiating, less resistance. Action feels simpler. not because it's easier, but because the debate is gone. This is why disciplined people don't talk about motivation. They don't need it. Their mind already expects follow-through. Expectation replaces effort. Now let's get specific. Self-trust is not built by intensity. It's built by accuracy, accurate promises, accurate execution. If you say you'll do 10 things and complete 3, you've damaged trust. If you say you'll do one thing and complete it, you've strengthened it. The size of the action is irrelevant. The accuracy is everything. This is why small daily wins matter more than occasional big pushes. Big pushes rely on emotion. Small wins rely on systems. And systems don't disappear when you're tired. Here is a rule you must adopt. Never promise what you cannot deliver consistently, not to others. And especially not to yourself. Your internal reputation matters more than your external one. People break self-trust quietly, then wonder why they feel insecure. Insecurity is not weakness, it's feedback. It's the mind saying, I don't know what to expect from you. Restore predictability, and insecurity fades. Now this also means something uncomfortable. You must stop lying to yourself about effort. Stop saying, I'll try. Stop saying, I'll start tomorrow. Stop saying, this week will be different. Those are not plans. They are delays disguised as hope. Replace them with specific, minimal commitments. I will do 5 minutes. I will do 1 page. I will show up even if it's sloppy. Then do exactly that. No more, no less. Doing more than promised feels good, but it's optional. Doing less than promised is destructive, because the brain doesn't reward enthusiasm. It rewards consistency. This is where many people misunderstand discipline. Discipline is not forcing yourself to do hard things. It's refusing to break agreements with yourself. Once that becomes your focus, behavior changes automatically. You stop chasing motivation. You stop waiting to feel ready. You act because that's who you've proven yourself to be. And here's the final shift. Self-trust creates confidence without noise. You don't need to convince yourself you can do something. You already know, because you've seen the evidence. And evidence silences doubt faster than any affirmation ever could. You don't need hype, you need proof. Proof stacks. Proof compounds. Proof creates authority. And authority is the real power. You now understand why motivation fails and self-trust lasts. But there is one more threat to self-trust you must confront. One habit that quietly destroys it faster than anything else: overpromising. You've learned why self-trust matters more than motivation. Now it's time to expose the behavior that undermines it every day. Chapter 4: The Hidden Damage of Overpromising. Overpromising feels productive. It sounds confident. It looks ambitious. It creates the illusion of momentum. But overpromising is one of the fastest ways to destroy self-trust, not because you fail publicly, but because you disappoint yourself privately. Large promises increase the chance of failure, and repeated failure trains the mind to expect disappointment. That expectation becomes your internal baseline, and once disappointment is expected, effort collapses. This is the damage most people never see. Overpromising does not just lead to missed goals. It rewires your brain to stop believing you. Every time you say, I'm going to do all of this, and don't, your mind adjusts downward, not emotionally. Strategically, it lowers investment, it reduces energy, it increases resistance, and you experience that resistance as procrastination. But procrastination is not laziness. It is your brain saying, I've seen this before. This probably won't happen. That belief doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from history, your history of promises. This is why big promises feel empowering at first. They give you a rush, but that rush is borrowed energy. And borrowed energy always comes due. When the promise is too large, life intervenes. Fatigue shows up, stress increases, motivation fades and the promise breaks again. The brain learns the pattern quickly. Big promise, initial excitement, incomplete follow-through, disappointment. Repeat that cycle long enough and your mind stops responding to intention. It waits for proof, and if proof rarely arrives, it stops cooperating. This is how people lose confidence without realizing it, not through one failure, but through hundreds of small betrayals. Now here is the correction. Small promises protect consistency. They reduce the chance of failure to near zero. They remove pressure. They make completion predictable, and predictability restores credibility. Credibility is everything. Your brain does not need you to be impressive. It needs you to be reliable. A small promise kept is worth more than a big promise broken. Every time. This is where most people resist. They think small promises are weak. They think they're lowering standards. They think they're settling. They're wrong. Small promises are not a lack of ambition. They are a strategy for permanence, because consistency is more powerful than intensity, and consistency requires promises you can keep. Here is the rule you must adopt if you want real change. Never promise more than you can deliver on your worst day, not your best day. Not your motivated day, your worst day. If you can keep the promise even when tired, distracted, or stressed, it is a good promise. If you need perfect conditions to keep it, it is a bad one. Bad promises damage trust. Good promises build it. This is not about lowering effort forever. It is about rebuilding your internal reputation first. Think of your self-trust like a bank account. Every kept promise is a deposit. Every broken promise is a withdrawal. Most people are overdrawn. They keep making big withdrawals and wonder why nothing works. Small promises are how you get out of debt. They rebuild the account quietly. No drama, no excitement, just steady restoration. This is why smaller promises create stronger minds. A strong mind is not one that dreams big. It is one that executes consistently. A strong mind expects follow-through. Because history supports that expectation becomes calm confidence. Now let's talk about how to implement this. First, you must shrink your promises immediately, not tomorrow. Now, whatever you are currently promising yourself, cut it in half, then cut it in half again, until it feels almost embarrassingly easy. That discomfort you feel, that's ego. Ignore it. Ego wants to be admired. Identity wants to be stable. Choose stability. Second, define promises in behavior, not outcomes. I will work on my business is not a promise. I will write one paragraph is. I will get in shape is not a promise. I will walk for 5 minutes is. Outcomes depend on variables you don't control. Behaviors don't. Your brain trusts what it can measure. Third, lock the promise to time, not mood. I'll do it when I feel like it is a lie. Mood is unreliable. Pick a time, pick a place, make it automatic. The less choice involved, the more likely completion becomes. This removes negotiation, and negotiation is where promises die. Fourth, stop upgrading promises prematurely. This is critical. The moment a small promise starts working, people try to make it bigger. They feel confident, they add more, and then they break it. Do not do this. Keep the promise small long enough for it to become boring. Boredom is the signal that the behavior has integrated. Only then should you expand. Expansion before integration destroys trust. Remember this phrase: smaller promises create stronger minds. Repeat it when you feel the urge to overcommit. Now, let's address the deeper reason people overpromise. They overpromise because they want to feel like a different person immediately. They want the identity without the evidence. Big promises allow fantasy. Small promises demand reality. Reality is slower, but reality works. This chapter is not asking you to think smaller forever. It is asking you to build the foundation first. Once credibility is restored, capacity grows naturally. But until then, overpromising is self-sabotage disguised as ambition. If you want big victories, you must earn the right to trust yourself. And that right is earned through small, kept promises. One per day is enough. One promise, one completion, one deposit, day after day. That is how identity stabilizes. That is how confidence returns. That is how control is rebuilt. You now understand why overpromising weakens the mind, and why restraint is not weakness, but intelligence. You've learned how to protect consistency and restore credibility. Now it's time to see what happens when those small promises start stacking. Because the real power isn't in one win, it's in what repeated wins create over time. Chapter 5: The Compounding Effect No One Teaches. One win feels good. It lifts your mood. It gives you a brief sense of relief. It creates a moment of pride. But one win does not change your life. This is where most people misunderstand progress. They chase the feeling of a win instead of the effect of repetition. Mood is temporary. Identity is permanent. One win changes how you feel today. Repeated wins change who you believe you are, and that belief determines everything that comes next. This is the compounding effect no one teaches. Not because it's complex, but because it's quiet. Compounding doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel exciting. At first, it feels almost pointless, and that's why most people quit before it works. The brain does not update identity from isolated events. It updates identity from patterns. Patterns of behavior, patterns of completion, patterns of follow-through. When a pattern repeats, the brain stops questioning it. It accepts it as normal, and once something becomes normal, it becomes automatic. That is the real power of small daily wins, not the motivation they create, but the expectation they install. At the beginning, every action feels like resistance. You debate, you negotiate, you hesitate, but after enough repetition, something shifts. The debate gets quieter. The hesitation shortens. The action starts happening with less effort. That is not willpower increasing. That is identity solidifying. Your mind begins to expect completion instead of resistance. Expectation is everything. If your brain expects struggle, it prepares resistance. If your brain expects completion, it prepares cooperation. This is why people who have built strong habits say things like, "I don't even think about it anymore." They're not exaggerating. They've crossed the threshold where behavior no longer feels optional. It feels normal, and normal behaviors don't require motivation. They require alignment. This is where compounding shows its true effect. At first, each small win feels insignificant. You think, this can't be enough. You think this isn't changing anything, but your brain is recording, quietly, relentlessly. Every completion strengthens a prediction: this person finishes. Every repetition reinforces that prediction. Eventually, the prediction becomes certainty, and certainty removes friction. This is why the early stage feels slow. You are laying down neural expectation. You are training anticipation. That work is invisible, but it is not wasted. Most people quit because they are looking for emotional payoff. Compounding offers structural payoff. Structural payoff lasts. Here is a critical distinction you must understand. Motivation reacts to outcomes. Identity reacts to patterns. If you want lasting change, you must stop measuring progress by feelings. Feelings fluctuate. Patterns accumulate. One day of discipline doesn't matter. 30 days of showing up matters a lot. This is why small daily wins beat occasional big efforts. Big efforts spike emotion. Small wins rewire expectation. And expectation is what drives behavior when you're tired, when you're stressed, when life interferes. Let's make this practical. Imagine two people. One works intensely for 1 week, then stops for 3. The other works lightly every day, who changes faster, not in results, in identity. The second person starts to see themselves differently. They don't say, "I'm trying." They say, "This is just what I do." That sentence is identity, and identity creates momentum without force. This is the compounding effect in action, not growth in output, growth in self-perception. Once that perception shifts, effort feels lighter, not because the work changed, but because resistance dropped. This is also why people who build consistency seem calmer. They are no longer fighting themselves. They've trained expectation. Their brain wakes up already assuming completion. No negotiation required. This is what automation really is. Not apps, not reminders. Automation of identity, and it only comes from repetition. Now let's address impatience. Impatience is the enemy of compounding. You want results to justify the effort, but compounding requires effort before visible results. This is where trust comes in. You must trust the process long enough for it to work, and trust is built the same way as identity, through evidence. Every small win is evidence that the system is alive, not impressive, but alive. Alive systems grow, dead systems collapse. If you keep showing up, even in small ways, the system survives, and survival precedes growth. This is why consistency feels boring. Boring is stable. Stable is scalable. Unstable effort feels exciting but collapses. Now here is a rule you must internalize. Never judge a system before it compounds. Most people quit at the exact point where compounding is about to begin, because the early returns are invisible. But invisible does not mean ineffective. It means foundational. This is also why you must resist the urge to constantly change methods. Switching systems resets compounding. Every restart puts you back at zero expectation. Pick one small win, stick with it, let it compound, let it get boring, let it integrate. Then and only then expand. Expansion without compounding is just activity. Compounding turns activity into identity, and identity turns effort into inevitability. Remember this phrase. What feels small today becomes automatic tomorrow. Say it when the action feels pointless. Say it when you feel impatient. Say it when you want to quit, because automation is the goal, not intensity, not excitement. Automation. Once a behavior becomes automatic, it no longer drains you, it fuels you. Because every automatic win reinforces who you are. This is how small wins lead to big personal victories, not through sudden breakthroughs, but through quiet accumulation, through expectation replacing resistance, through identity replacing effort. You now understand the compounding effect no one teaches. You understand why repetition matters more than scale, but there is one more misconception we must destroy. Many people think discipline is something you force. They're wrong. Discipline is something that emerges, and that's what we need to talk about next. You've seen how small wins compound into identity. Now let's dismantle the myth of willpower. Chapter 6: Discipline is a side effect, not a skill. Most people think discipline is something you learn, a technique, a mindset, a muscle you train through force. They're wrong. Discipline is not a skill you practice. It is a side effect you earn. It emerges naturally when identity aligns with behavior. When who you believe you are matches what you repeatedly do, discipline appears without effort. That's the truth no one teaches. People who look disciplined are not constantly fighting themselves. They are not locked in daily battles of willpower. They are not relying on motivation. They have removed the fight entirely. They have aligned identity with action. And when that alignment happens, discipline stops feeling like force. It feels like default. This is why chasing discipline directly never works. The more you try to force yourself, the more resistance you create. The more resistance you create, the more friction you feel. The more friction you feel, the harder everything becomes. Force creates friction. Alignment removes it. The disciplined life is not built through pressure. It's built through installation. Say it clearly, you don't force discipline, you install it. Installation happens through small daily wins. Small wins remove internal negotiation, and negotiation is the enemy. Every time you debate whether to act, you lose energy. Every time you argue with yourself, you leak focus. Every time you hesitate, you weaken momentum. Discipline appears when there is nothing left to negotiate, when the decision has already been made by identity. Think about the things you already do without effort. You don't debate brushing your teeth. You don't negotiate putting on clothes. You don't wait for motivation to eat. Why? Because those behaviors are integrated. They are part of who you are, no discipline required. This is the model, not heroic effort, not constant struggle. Integration, and integration only comes from repetition. Small daily wins remove friction because they don't trigger internal resistance. They are easy enough to complete, simple enough to repeat, clear enough to remember. Over time, the brain stops questioning them, and when questioning stops, discipline appears. This is why people fail when they try to overhaul their life overnight. They introduce too many decisions at once, too much change, too much friction. The mind pushes back, not because it hates progress, but because it hates instability. Small wins create stability. Stability creates trust. Trust creates alignment. Alignment creates discipline. This is the chain, and you cannot skip steps. Let's talk about internal negotiation more clearly. Internal negotiation sounds like this: I'll do it later. I'll start tomorrow. I don't have the energy right now. I'll make up for it later. Every one of those sentences weakens discipline, because discipline is not about saying yes to action. It's about removing the option to say no. Small daily wins do exactly that. They are non-negotiable because they are manageable. You don't argue with tasks you know you can complete. You argue with tasks that feel heavy, so the solution is not more willpower. The solution is lighter tasks. Tasks so light that resistance has nothing to grab onto. This is how discipline gets installed, quietly. Now here is the mistake people make. They see someone disciplined and assume that person forces themselves, so they try to copy the effort. They wake up earlier, they push harder, they add more, and they burn out, because they copied the output, not the process. The process is boring. The process is repetitive. The process is small, that's why it works. Discipline is not created by intensity. It is created by inevitability. When a behavior becomes inevitable, discipline becomes irrelevant. You're no longer being disciplined. You're just being consistent. And consistency is easier than discipline, because consistency relies on structure, not emotion. This is why your focus must remain on installation. Install one behavior at a time. Protect it, repeat it, let it integrate, then move on. Do not rush. Rushing resets friction. Now let's get practical again. Here is how you install discipline properly. First, identify one behavior you want to become automatic, not impressive, foundational, something that supports everything else. Second, shrink it until it feels too easy. This is critical. If it feels challenging, shrink it more. The goal is not progress. The goal is repetition. Third, remove choice. Same time. Same place, same trigger. Choice creates negotiation. Negotiation kills discipline. Fourth, protect the streak. Not because streaks are magical, but because repetition is. A streak is proof of installation in progress. Fifth, do not expand until the behavior feels boring. Boring means integrated. Integrated means installed. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They feel a little discipline show up and immediately raise the bar. They turn installation into performance, and the system collapses. Do not do this. Discipline that survives is quiet. Now let's address a deeper issue. Some people secretly believe discipline must feel painful to be legitimate. They think ease means cheating. That belief keeps them stuck. Pain is not proof of effectiveness. Consistency is. Ease is not weakness. Ease is optimization. The disciplined mind is optimized, not exhausted. This is why small daily wins are so powerful. They conserve energy. They reduce friction. They allow discipline to emerge instead of being forced. You don't force discipline, you install it. Repeat that. Because this chapter is not about trying harder, it's about trying smarter. Once discipline is installed, bigger challenges become manageable, not because you are tougher, but because your identity supports the behavior. When identity supports behavior, effort drops. This is the real benefit of small daily wins. They don't just create progress, they change the internal environment. They make action feel natural. And natural action compounds faster than forced action ever will. You now understand why discipline is not something you chase. It is something that shows up when the system is right. And when discipline shows up, something else changes too, momentum. Because once friction is gone, movement accelerates. You've learned how discipline emerges without force. Now it's time to understand the force that carries you forward once discipline is installed. Chapter 7: Momentum is psychological, not physical. Most people misunderstand momentum. They think it's physical. They think it comes from working harder, from pushing longer, from stacking effort on top of effort. They're wrong. Momentum is not created by intensity. Momentum is created by completion. What feels like energy is actually cooperation from your brain, and your brain only cooperates when it expects success. This is the shift you must understand. Progress feels energizing not because the work is easy, but because the mind is being rewarded for consistency. The brain does not reward effort. It rewards resolution. Starting drains energy. Finishing restores it. That's why unfinished tasks weigh on you. That's why procrastination feels heavy. That's why action feels lighter after you begin. Momentum is psychological relief. Relief from indecision. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from internal conflict. And that relief comes from completion. Say it clearly, completion creates momentum, not effort. One completed task makes the next easier. Not because the next task is smaller, but because resistance has already dropped. Resistance is mental friction, and friction lives before action, not during it. This is why starting feels harder than continuing. Once you're moving, movement sustains itself, but the brain must believe movement is likely. That belief comes from proof. Proof comes from finished actions. This is why small wins are so powerful for momentum. They don't just move you forward, they remove mental resistance. Each completion tells the brain, this system works, and once the brain believes the system works, it invests more energy. This is not motivation, this is prediction. The brain predicts outcome. If it predicts failure, it withholds energy. If it predicts completion, it releases it. Momentum is simply the brain releasing energy because it expects follow-through. This is also why inconsistency kills momentum faster than difficulty. You can do hard things if you're consistent, but if you're inconsistent, even easy things feel heavy, because inconsistency destroys prediction, and when prediction disappears, the brain pulls back. Let's break this illusion right now. You don't lose momentum because you rest. You lose momentum because you stop completing. Rest does not break momentum. Indecision does. Avoidance does. Unfinished loops do. That's why people feel tired even when they haven't done much. Their mind is full of open tabs. Each open tab drains energy. Each completed task closes a loop. Closed loops restore mental bandwidth. That restored bandwidth feels like momentum. So the strategy is not more effort. The strategy is more closure. Finish more things, even small things, especially small things. Because finishing small things trains the brain to expect closure. Expectation lowers resistance. Lower resistance accelerates action. This is the compounding loop, and once it starts, it feeds itself. Now here's where people go wrong. They wait to feel momentum before acting. That's backwards. Momentum comes after completion, not before. Waiting for momentum is like waiting for warmth before lighting the fire. Completion is the spark. Effort is not. Effort without completion just exhausts you. Completion without effort energizes you. That sounds counterintuitive, but it's psychologically precise. Let's make this practical. If you feel stuck, don't ask, how do I do more? Ask, what can I finish right now? Not start, finish. One email, one paragraph, one task. Finishing creates movement. Movement creates belief. Belief creates energy. This is also why long to-do lists are dangerous. They focus attention on what's unfinished, not what's completed. That creates psychological drag. A better approach is a done list. Track completions, not intentions. Your brain needs to see progress. Seeing progress increases prediction of future progress. Prediction creates momentum. This is why checking something off a list feels good. It's not childish. It's neurological. Your brain rewards closure. Use that. Another mistake people make is starting too many things at once. Multiple starts create multiple open loops. Open loops drain energy. One finish creates momentum. Multiple finishes create flow. So the rule is simple. Limit starts. Maximize finishes, especially early in the day. The first completion matters the most. It sets the prediction tone. If your brain sees a win early, it expects more. If it sees avoidance early, it prepares resistance. This is why your first daily win should be small and guaranteed, not impressive, predictable, because momentum thrives on certainty, and certainty comes from repeatable completion. Now let's address intensity again. Intensity feels productive, but intensity often leaves things unfinished. You go hard, you burn energy, you stop halfway. That does not build momentum. That builds fatigue and doubt. Your brain learns effort does not equal payoff, and it resists future effort. Consistency teaches a better lesson. Action leads to closure. Closure leads to relief. Relief leads to energy. That's momentum. This is also why people with momentum appear calm. They're not frantic. They're not rushing. They're finishing. Calm completion beats frantic effort every time. So here is the behavioral shift you must make. Stop measuring progress by how hard you work. Start measuring it by how often you finish. Ask yourself at the end of each day, what did I complete? Not what did I try? Not what did I plan? Completion is the only metric that matters for momentum. And remember this phrase, completion creates momentum, not effort. Say it when you feel stuck. Say it when you feel overwhelmed. Say it when you feel tired, because tiredness often comes from mental clutter, not physical exhaustion. Clear the clutter by finishing something, anything. Momentum will follow. You now understand why momentum feels like energy, and why chasing intensity drains you. But there is another trap waiting. Even with momentum, people still sabotage themselves. They confuse intensity with consistency, and that confusion costs them everything. You've learned how momentum actually works. Now it's time to learn why doing less more often always wins. Chapter 8: Why Consistency Beats Intensity Every Time. The intensity looks impressive. It's loud, it's emotional, it feels powerful in the moment. You go all in, you push hard, you promise yourself this time will be different, and then the spike fades, energy crashes, life interferes. The routine breaks. This is the pattern intensity creates. Spikes without standards, effort without structure, motion without permanence. Consistency works differently. Consistency is quiet, unremarkable, almost boring, and that's why it wins. Intensity creates spikes. Consistency creates standards, and standards shape behavior faster than ambition ever could. Most people confuse effort with effectiveness. They think doing more, harder, and faster is the answer, but the mind does not adapt to what is extreme. It adapts to what is repeated. Extreme actions shock the system. Repeated actions rewire it. This is the difference between short-term change and long-term transformation. Intensity excites the nervous system. Consistency trains it. Training beats excitement every time. Here's the truth you need to accept. Your brain is a prediction machine. It does not ask, "What are you capable of at your best?" It asks, "What do you do regularly?" Regular behavior becomes expectation. Expectation becomes identity. This is why intensity fails to stick. It is irregular. It shows up randomly. It disappears without warning. The brain cannot build an identity around chaos, so it ignores intensity once the emotion fades. Consistency, on the other hand, sends a clear signal. This happens no matter what. That signal matters. The mind adapts to reliability. This is why standards matter more than goals. Goals are destinations. Standards are rules. Goals say, "I want to get there." Standards say, "This is how I live." Standards remove debate. You don't negotiate standards, you enforce them. And enforcement becomes automatic when the standard is realistic. This is where consistency beats intensity at the identity level. Intensity is optional. Consistency is expected. When something is expected, it no longer requires motivation. It requires compliance. Compliance sounds harsh, but it's freeing. Because once behavior becomes non-negotiable, it stops draining energy. This is why consistent people seem calm. They are not deciding every day. They are following standards. And standards shape behavior faster than ambition. Ambition wants big outcomes. Standards govern daily actions. Ambition lives in the future. Standards live in the present, and only the present changes identity. Let's talk about why intensity feels good. Intensity gives you instant feedback. You sweat, you strain, you feel alive. Consistency doesn't always feel like much. Some days it feels like nothing. That's why the ego prefers intensity. Intensity feeds the ego. Consistency feeds the system. But systems win. This is also why people burn out. They rely on intensity to compensate for lack of structure. They push hard when inspired, then they collapse. The collapse isn't a failure of willpower, it's a failure of design. A system that depends on intensity is fragile. A system built on consistency is resilient. Resilience matters more than force. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If you can't do something consistently, it's not part of your identity yet, and pretending otherwise delays progress. Consistency is honesty. It shows you what you can actually maintain, and that honesty is useful, because it allows you to build standards you can keep, and kept standards shape behavior. This is why small daily actions beat heroic efforts, not because they're impressive, but because they're repeatable. Repetition trains the nervous system. The nervous system doesn't care about your goals. It cares about patterns. What you repeat becomes familiar. What is familiar becomes comfortable. What is comfortable becomes automatic. This is how behavior changes permanently. Now let's make this practical. You must stop asking, "How hard should I push?" and start asking, "What can I repeat without fail?" That question changes everything, because repetition forces realism. It strips away fantasy. It reveals capacity. Once you know your capacity, you can build standards around it. And standards are the real engine of growth. Here is a rule you must adopt. Never set a standard you can't maintain when life gets messy. If your routine only works when conditions are perfect, it's not a standard. It's a wish. Standards survive stress. Intensity collapses under it. This is why consistency feels slower at first. You're building something that can survive. Survival comes before expansion. Another mistake people make is confusing boredom with stagnation. Consistency gets boring. That's not a flaw, that's a signal. Boredom means the action no longer threatens your identity. It's integrated, and integrated behaviors are powerful. They don't need attention. They don't need hype. They just happen. This is why boredom is progress. It means the standard is installed. Now let's talk about ambition. Ambition is not bad. But ambition without standards is chaos. Ambition pushes you to attempt too much too soon. Standards keep ambition grounded. They slow you down just enough to make progress permanent. Think of ambition as the vision. Standards are the rails. Without rails, speed causes derailment. With rails, speed becomes sustainable. Standards shape behavior faster than ambition. Repeat that, because ambition feels good, but standards change lives. Now here's what you must do next. Audit your current efforts. Where are you relying on intensity? Where are you going all in sporadically instead of showing up consistently? Where are you mistaking effort for effectiveness? Be honest. Then shrink the behavior, not because you're weak, but because you're strategic. Shrink it until it can be repeated daily. That daily repetition becomes your standard. Protect it, defend it, do not upgrade it prematurely. Let it run long enough to shape identity. Once identity shifts, capacity increases naturally. This is how big personal victories are actually built, not through heroic bursts, but through enforced standards. Standards remove decision-making. They remove negotiation. They remove excuses. And once excuses disappear, progress accelerates. You now understand why consistency beats intensity every time, why repetition rewires the mind, why standards outwork ambition, but there is still one internal enemy left. Even with consistency and standards, doubt can creep in, quietly, persistently, and if left unchecked, it will slow everything down. You've learned how to act consistently. Now it's time to eliminate the voice that questions whether it's working. Chapter 9: Small Wins Silence Self-Doubt. Self-doubt is not mysterious. It is not a personality flaw. It is not a lack of confidence. It is not something you need to overcome. Self-doubt is a data problem. It thrives in the absence of evidence. When the mind has no proof, it fills the gap with questions. When questions repeat, doubt grows. When doubt grows, action slows. That's the entire cycle. Self-doubt is not an emotion. It is an argument, an internal argument about whether you can be trusted to follow through. And arguments only exist when there is uncertainty. Certainty ends debate. Proof creates certainty. This is why daily completion is so powerful. Daily completion leaves no room for internal argument. When you finish something, anything, the mind loses its leverage. It has nothing to question, no speculation, no hypothetical failure. No imagined weakness, just fact. You did what you said you would do. That fact matters more than positive thinking ever could. Most people try to defeat self-doubt with reassurance. They tell themselves, I can do this, I've got this, I'm capable. But reassurance without evidence feels hollow. The mind rejects it because the mind is not persuaded by words. It is persuaded by patterns. This is why affirmations fail when behavior doesn't match. The brain checks the record. If the record is empty or worse, inconsistent, the affirmation is ignored. Self-doubt survives. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Self-doubt is not lying to you. It is reporting incomplete data. It's saying, I don't see enough proof yet. That's not an enemy. That's feedback, and feedback can be answered. not with emotion, with evidence. Evidence comes from completion, not big, dramatic completion. Small, undeniable completion. This is why small wins silence self-doubt faster than big achievements. Big achievements are rare, small wins are frequent, and frequency beats magnitude when it comes to belief. The brain updates belief through accumulation. One completed task is a data point. 10 completed tasks form a pattern. Patterns silence doubt. This is why people who complete small things daily appear confident. They are not louder, they are not more optimistic, they are more certain. Certainty does not need to be defended. Now let's talk about the voice of self-doubt. It usually sounds reasonable. It says things like, "Is this really working? Shouldn't you be further along by now? What if this doesn't matter? Are you sure you're capable of this? Notice something." These questions only show up when progress is unclear. They do not show up after completion. Finish something and the voice goes quiet, not forever, but for long enough to move. This is the key. You don't need to eliminate self-doubt permanently. You just need to keep it quiet enough to act. And action generates the proof that keeps it quiet. This is the loop. Completion, right arrow, proof, right arrow, certainty, right arrow, reduced doubt, right arrow, easier action, right arrow, more completion. That loop is self-reinforcing, and it starts small. Here is where people make a critical mistake. They wait until doubt disappears before acting. That will never happen. Doubt disappears after proof accumulates, not before. Say it clearly, doubt disappears when proof accumulates. Not when confidence increases, not when fear goes away, not when conditions improve, when proof accumulates. So the strategy is not to fight doubt. The strategy is to outwork it with evidence, and evidence does not require intensity, it requires consistency. This is why small daily wins are the most effective anti-doubt tool available. They don't argue with doubt, they render it irrelevant. When you complete something every day, the doubt voice has nothing new to say. It repeats itself, and repetition without results weakens it. Over time, the voice fades. Not because you silenced it, but because it lost credibility. Now let's make this practical. If self-doubt is loud in your life right now, ask yourself this: what have I completed consistently in the last 30 days? If the answer is nothing, doubt makes sense. There is no proof. If the answer is a few things inconsistently, doubt still makes sense. The data is mixed, but if the answer is one thing every day, doubt struggles, because the data is clear. This is why the solution to self-doubt is boring. One small win, daily, tracking matters. Not for accountability to others, for visibility to yourself. The mind forgets progress quickly. Tracking prevents selective memory. It turns completion into visible proof. Visible proof strengthens certainty. Certainty weakens doubt. Now here's another important shift. Stop trying to eliminate doubt globally. Focus on eliminating it locally. Doubt does not need to vanish everywhere. It only needs to be quiet at the moment of action. Completion creates that quiet. This is why starting small matters so much. If the task is too big, doubt has room to argue. If the task is small, doubt has no leverage. You don't debate 5 minutes. You don't question one paragraph. You don't overthink one action. You just do it. And once you do, the doubt loses the round. Lose enough rounds and it stops showing up. This is also why self-doubt returns when routines break, not because you're failing, but because the flow of evidence stopped. Restart evidence and doubt retreats again. No drama required. This is mechanical. Another mistake people make is trying to think their way out of doubt. They analyze, they reflect, they question the questioning. All of that feeds the argument. Doubt thrives on attention. Completion starves it. So here is the rule: when doubt speaks, do not respond with thought. Respond with action, not big action. Immediate action. Finish something small. That single act shifts the internal balance, because doubt cannot argue with completion. It can only argue with intention, and intention is cheap. Completion is expensive. That's why it works. Doubt disappears when proof accumulates. Repeat that when you feel uncertain. Repeat it when you feel behind. Repeat it when the voice gets loud. Then go create proof. One small win, today, not tomorrow, not when you feel better, today. Because the goal is not to feel confident, the goal is to remove the argument, and arguments end when evidence arrives. You now understand how small wins silence self-doubt, how daily completion stabilizes belief, how proof replaces reassurance, but there is one final step. All of this only works if you choose the right win, one win that anchors everything else, one daily action that becomes non-negotiable. You've learned how doubt fades through proof. Now let's define the single daily win that changes everything. Chapter 10: The Daily Win That Changes Everything. If everything you've heard so far feels powerful but overwhelming, this chapter is where it all collapses into simplicity. Because transformation does not require complexity. It requires one anchor, one daily win. One action so small you cannot fail it. One action so meaningful it reminds you who you are. That single win becomes the spine of your identity. This is where most people overthink and sabotage themselves. They want multiple habits, multiple systems, multiple areas optimized at once. That's chaos disguised as ambition. Order comes from one standard. One non-negotiable daily action becomes an anchor for identity. An anchor does not move. Everything else moves around it. Without an anchor, your effort drifts. With an anchor, your life stabilizes. This is why one daily win changes everything. Not 10, not 5, 1, because identity needs clarity. The brain asks one question every day: what kind of person am I proving myself to be today? One win answers that question, clearly, immediately, without debate. Now here is the rule you must follow. The daily win must meet two criteria. It must be small enough to never fail, and important enough to matter. If it's too big, you'll miss days. Missed days weaken identity. If it's too small and meaningless, it won't register psychologically. It won't count as proof. The right win sits in the middle, simple, repeatable, symbolic. This is not about productivity. This is about identity reinforcement. That's why the content of the win matters less than its consistency. Consistency is the signal. One win a day keeps chaos away, not because it fixes everything immediately, but because it prevents internal collapse. Most chaos starts internally. Disorganization, self-doubt, emotional volatility, those are identity problems, and identity stabilizes when there is one daily certainty. One thing you do no matter what, rain or shine, good mood or bad, busy or calm, that is power. Let's talk about what this daily win is not. It is not something dependent on motivation. It is not something that requires perfect conditions. It is not something that drains you. If your win depends on energy, it will fail. If it depends on time, it will fail. If it depends on mood, it will fail. The daily win must survive bad days, because bad days are when identity is most vulnerable. Now let's talk about what it should be. The daily win should be an action that represents the person you are becoming, not the end goal. The direction: if you want to become disciplined, the win represents discipline. If you want to become focused, the win represents focus. If you want to become physically strong, the win represents movement. It doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be consistent. 5 minutes counts. 1 page counts. One decision counts. The brain does not measure size. It measures completion. Completion is what updates identity. This is why people with one strong daily win seem grounded, even when life is chaotic. because chaos does not penetrate identity. Identity is protected by standards. And the daily win is the smallest enforceable standard. Now here is the hardest part. You must protect this win aggressively, not from others, from yourself, from expansion, from optimization, from ego. Ego will whisper, "This is too easy, you should do more." Ignore it. More is the enemy of consistent. Upgrade only after months of completion, never before. The goal is not to grow the habit. The goal is to deepen the identity. Identity deepens through time, not intensity. This is where people break the system. They feel good for a few weeks. They add more, they miss days, the anchor breaks, and chaos returns. So hear this clearly. The daily win does not exist to improve performance. It exists to protect self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of everything else. When self-trust is intact, effort feels lighter. When self-trust is broken, everything feels heavy. One kept promise per day is enough to maintain self-trust. That's it. This is why the daily win must be non-negotiable, not optional, not flexible, non-negotiable. Negotiation invites failure. Standards eliminate it. Now let's address resistance. You might be thinking, one small thing can't possibly be enough. That thought comes from a misunderstanding of how change works. Big outcomes are not built by big actions. They are built by stable identities. Stable identities produce consistent behavior. Consistent behavior compounds. Compounding creates results. You're not skipping steps, you're respecting the order. Identity first, results later. This is the opposite of how most people operate. They chase results first, then wonder why nothing sticks. Now let's make this actionable. You need to choose your daily win today, not after this audiobook ends, today. Ask yourself 3 questions. What is one action I can complete even on my worst day? What action aligns with the person I want to become? What action would bother me if I skipped it? That 3rd question matters. If skipping it creates internal friction, it means the action has meaning. Meaning creates identity impact. Choose that, then define it clearly. No ambiguity, not exercise, but 5 minutes of movement, not read, but 1 page, not work on the project. But open the document and write 1 sentence. Clarity removes loopholes. Loopholes destroy standards. Once defined, lock it in. Same time if possible. Same trigger if possible. Predictability strengthens habit formation. But remember, timing is secondary. Completion is primary. If the day is chaotic, do it late. If the day collapses, do it small. Just do not skip. Skipping sends a signal, the wrong one. Now here is a powerful reframe. The daily win is not about the action itself. It's about proving this sentence every day. I am the kind of person who keeps promises to myself. That belief is rare, and it is priceless. People who have it move differently. They trust themselves. They act without drama. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on standards, and standards are quiet power. 1 win a day keeps chaos away, because chaos feeds on inconsistency. Consistency starves it. You now have the final tool, the anchor, the daily win, but knowing is not enough. Execution matters, and execution requires a final shift, a shift from consuming ideas to enforcing standards. You've learned why small wins matter, how identity is built, how doubt fades, how consistency wins. Now it's time to close the loop, to turn understanding into action, to stop listening and start enforcing. This is where the book ends, and where your responsibility begins. Chapter 11, Build the System That Makes Winning Inevitable. If you've made it this far, you already know the truth most people avoid. Winning is not about willpower. It's not about motivation. It's not about confidence. Those are unstable resources. They fluctuate. They fail under pressure. They disappear when life gets hard. Winning becomes inevitable only when decision-making is removed. That is the purpose of a system. A system replaces emotion with structure. It replaces choice with execution. It replaces hope with inevitability. This is the final shift. You stop trying to win, and you start installing conditions where losing is difficult. That is real power. Most people live inside constant decision fatigue. Should I work today? Should I rest? Should I push? Should I wait? Every question drains energy, and drained energy leads to inconsistency. Inconsistency destroys progress. A system eliminates these questions. The system decides in advance. This is why high performers look calm. They are not debating with themselves all day. They are following instructions they already agreed to. Remove decision-making. Predefine the win. That single principle changes everything, because the brain loves certainty. When behavior is predecided, resistance drops. There is nothing to negotiate. You simply execute. This is why systems outperform goals. Goals ask you to make good decisions repeatedly. Systems make the decision once. Once is easier than every day. Now let's be clear. A system is not complicated. Complex systems fail. Simple systems survive. A system is just a set of rules you obey regardless of mood. That's it. Rules like, at this time I do this. No matter how I feel, I complete this. If X happens, I respond with Y. Simple, clear, predictable. Predictability creates momentum, and momentum sustains progress without effort. This is how success becomes automatic. When the system is right, success is automatic. Say it again, because this removes pressure. You are no longer responsible for feeling ready. You are responsible for following the system. That's a lighter burden. Now let's talk about why people resist systems. Because systems feel restrictive. They feel boring. They feel like a loss of freedom. But that's an illusion. Systems create freedom. They free you from emotional chaos. They free you from self-negotiation. They free you from inconsistency. Without a system, you are at the mercy of your internal state. With a system, your internal state becomes irrelevant. That's freedom. Now let's connect this to everything you've learned. Small wins matter because they feed the system. Consistency matters because it stabilizes the system. The daily win matters because it anchors the system. The system is the container. Without it, everything leaks. Now here is the key design principle. Your system must make the right action easier than the wrong one. If the wrong action is easier, willpower will fail, always. So you must engineer your environment. This is not discipline. This is intelligence. Remove friction from the behavior you want. Add friction to the behavior you don't. Lay out your tools in advance. Schedule the action before the day begins. Reduce steps. The fewer steps, the higher the follow-through. This is why systems work even when motivation is low, because they don't ask much. They ask for compliance. Now let's address mood. Mood is unreliable. Building a life that depends on mood is reckless. Systems ignore mood. They do not care if you feel inspired. They only care if the rule was followed. This is why systems build confidence. Confidence comes from reliability. Reliability comes from execution. Execution comes from systems, not feelings. The same applies to energy. Energy fluctuates. Systems adapt. Your system should scale down automatically on bad days. That's critical. Bad days should not break the system. They should trigger the minimum version of the win. This keeps the streak alive, and streaks matter. Streaks create identity continuity. Identity continuity creates momentum. Momentum creates progress. Now let's define what your system must include. First, a trigger. A specific moment that initiates the action, not sometime today. A real cue, after coffee, before bed, when I open my laptop. Triggers remove ambiguity. Second, a predefined action. The daily win you already chose, clear, measurable, small. Third, a rule for bad days. This is where most systems fail. You must define the minimum, the smallest acceptable version, not skipping. Downshifting. Downshifting preserves identity. Skipping breaks it. Fourth, tracking, simple tracking, a check mark, a note, a visual cue. Tracking turns action into evidence. Evidence reinforces identity. Now let's talk about why this makes winning inevitable. Because once the system is running, effort decreases. The system carries you. You don't need to be exceptional. You just need to be compliant. Compliance beats talent when talent is inconsistent. Always. This is why ordinary people with strong systems outperform gifted people without them. The system does not care who you are. It rewards whoever follows it. That's fairness. Now here's the final psychological shift. Stop identifying as someone trying to improve. Start identifying as someone who follows systems. Trying is unstable. Following is stable. Trying depends on emotion. Following depends on rules. Rules outlast emotions. This is how long-term change happens. Quietly, unremarkably, inevitably. You won't feel like a different person overnight. You will act like one daily, and eventually the feeling catches up. Identity follows evidence. Evidence comes from systems. This is the chain. Now listen carefully. You do not need a perfect system. You need a functioning one. Perfection delays execution. Execution refines the system. Start simple. Start today. Lock in the daily win. Define the trigger. Define the minimum. Track it. Then stop thinking about it. Let the system work. This is the end of the audiobook, but it's the beginning of the standard. You now understand the mechanics of change. Small wins, evidence-based identity, consistency over intensity, systems over motivation. The only thing left is enforcement, not tomorrow. Not next week, today, because the system only works when it is active. And once it's active, winning stops being a question. It becomes a consequence. When the system is right, success is automatic. Build the system, follow the system, and let time do the rest. Big victories are not found in moments of intensity. They are built in moments of consistency. Every small win you complete tells your mind one thing: I follow through. That message compounds. It hardens into self-trust. Self-trust becomes confidence. Confidence becomes control. And control is the real victory. Starting today, your challenge is simple. Choose one small win. Make it daily. Make it unavoidable. Don't aim to change your life. Aim to prove to your mind, once per day, that you are someone who finishes. Do that long enough and big victories won't feel exciting. They'll feel inevitable.